All right, well, welcome, and hopefully we're having a good start to our Friday here. And my goal is to not take that much of our class time, but I just want to check in and double check that everything is going well, and continue with our study here on the human impact of the Second World War, looking at different groups here. So. Again, here, welcome for those who have just joined. So today, I do want to spotlight a little bit here on Black history. And so this will be my last spotlight for this month, knowing that February being a short month, when we come back next week, it's going to be March and the last week of the trimester here. So with that, the spotlight here is on a giant in the civil rights movement, and he is John Lewis. And John Lewis had recently passed away. I want to say 2020, he had passed away. John Lewis is is considered kind of the lion of the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Clearly is someone that is easily recognizable with the civil rights movement. Next to him is John Lewis. And so John Lewis, he had been, after his role as a civil rights leader and activist, I mean, he continues with that the rest of his life. He does become a politician for Georgia. He was born outside of Troy, Alabama in 1940 to parents who were sharecroppers. Inspired by Martin Luther King Jr. and the Montgomery bus boycott, he is going to dedicate now his life to the cause as well as to civil disobedience and nonviolent protests. He went on to American Baptist Theology Seminary, where he really becomes indoctrinated, one would say, in civil disobedience and nonviolence, and becomes active in the civil rights movement, the grassroots movement in Nashville. He learned about nonviolence protests, organized sit-ins, and participated in the Freedom Rides in 1961. And he was arrested and beat numerous times. One thing that he would say is he always somehow felt freer when he would be arrested, which is it's an interesting way of thinking. He was one of the Big Six who organized March on Washington in 1963. The other members of that Big Six, besides John Lewis, you have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. You have Roy Wilkins, who was head of the NAACP. You have A. Philip Randolph, a labor activist with the AFL-CIOs, and more specifically the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porter. Whitney Young of the Urban League, James Farmer of CORE, and of course, he's part of, John Lewis is part of that Big Six as well. Chairman of SNCC from 63 to 66. And when he left SNCC, he felt a little lost, especially because of the changing nature of SNCC. But he will eventually, very quickly, pick up and move on with another direction with the cause. Led the march from Selma to Montgomery in 1965. So if you ever seen that movie Selma, he is spotlighted in it. And that first attempt is going to be known as Bloody Sunday. And that's going to be captured on film. And that's really going to galvanize the nation. So when we look at this, one thing that John Lewis had said at the March on Washington, we all recognize the fact that if any radical social, political, and economic changes are to take place in our society, the people, the masses, must bring them about. And so he really is speaking a lot about grassroots, and I've got some goosebumps thinking about that it is the people and the masses that are going to put pressure on those institutions to create the change. And he just thinks, one of the biggest vehicles of it is nonviolence and civil disobedience, way about doing it. And when we look at John Lewis, he becomes director of the voter education program in 1986. He served Georgia, and he will remain U.S. House of Representative until he dies in 2020. He was a champion for healthcare reform, fighting poverty, improving education, and most importantly, the renewals of the Voter Rights Act, even though a few years ago the Voting Rights Act had some elements cut out of it. The voting was the critical piece here in the civil rights movement, as we find out. When we were organizing voter registration drives, going on freedom rides, sit-ins, coming here to Washington for the first time, getting arrested, going to jail, being beaten, I never dreamed of the possibility that an African American would one day be elected president of the United States. And so the day that Barack Obama was elected, it was a proud moment for John Lewis to see that, as well as many others as well, to see that. And he was very emotional that day. I remember it distinctly on as he was being interviewed numerous times as a result of that historic moment. Lewis passed away July 17th, 2020 from pancreatic cancer, and created a series. He also created a series of graphic novels about his work in the civil rights movement. In 2016, he won the National Book Award for the third installment, March Book 3, which marks the first time a graphic novel had received the honor. And I have read a number of his works, and they are very inspirational. The civil rights icon was also honored with numerous awards, including Presidential Medal of Freedom, the NAACP's Spingarn Medal, and the sole JFK's Profile and Courage Award for lifetime achievement. He definitely is a very well-deserving individual of those awards. He is one of the lions of the movements here. All right, so I do have a little video clip here, and so we'll take a moment, we'll take a look at this. Let me mute my mic.
We started organizing. We were able to bring more than 250,000 people to march in Washington. And we all had to prepare a speech. I was very young, 23 years old, had all of my hair and a few pounds lighter.
I have the pleasure to present to this.
When A. Philip Randolph said, I now present to you young John Lewis, the National Chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Brother John Lewis.
I looked to my right. I saw hundreds and hundreds of young people who had been involved during the early days. Looked straight ahead. I saw this sea of humanity. Then I looked to the left. I saw young black men and young white men up in the trees, trying to get a better view. And then I said to myself, well, this is it. And I looked straight ahead again. And something said to me, go for it. And I opened my mouth and I started speaking.
We march today for jobs and freedom,
But we have nothing to be proud of. But hundreds and thousands of our brothers are not here. But they're receiving starvation wages or no wages at all. Those who have said be patient and wait, we must say that we cannot be patient. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now. The time will come when we will not confine our marching to Washington. We will march through the South, through the streets of Jackson, through the streets of Danville, through the streets of Cambridge, through the streets of Birmingham. We must say, wake up, America, wake up, for we cannot stop, and we will not and cannot be patient.
Hi, YouTubers. I'm excited to give you an update.
All right. You know, sometimes I think, you know, we get a little nervous when we stand in front of a group of individuals to give a speech, you know, just in our own classroom. You know, might be your experience of it, or you're in a lecture hall and you're giving a speech before a group of people. But standing in front of nearly 100,000 individuals and giving a speech, I think that is a little intimidating, but it's in John Lewis's wheelhouse in terms of you know, when you look at his ability to speak. It's he has a gift of it, and does, you know, one thing is when he's a preacher, or to work on his speeches. As a little kid, what he would do is he would be given sermons and speeches to the chickens that were on his farm that he grew up on, and using that platform to begin to define a little bit of his speaking ability, and then being able to transcend it to you know, others that or onto different platforms. That's just incredible. Okay. Anyone have any thoughts or questions about that? Feel free to unmute or put into the chat anything about John Lewis. That was interesting.
We started organizing.
Okay. What I do want, though, is continue with our look at human impact. Yesterday, I talked a little bit about and had a video clip about Japanese internment and the impact of, or the reasons behind Japanese internment, some of the immediate impact of it, and ramifications of Japanese internment. Today, I want to take a look at African American troops here, and that was one of your options that you could focus on. African American, their role in the war, on the fighting front, and then also at home as well. Those that are fighting, we're looking at about maybe 1.5 million actually are going to put on the uniform here. And because of Jim Crow, they're going to serve in segregated units. And I've said that a few times before, referenced it. It's not until 1948 does the armed forces become desegregated. In the Korean War is where we'll actually see integrated armed forces, Army, Navy, Marines, as well as Air Force by 1950. The Air Force is really part of the Army right now in the Second World War. We also, you know, for African Americans, this war in many ways represents an opportunity here, another platform to perhaps showcase some of the concerns at home. Those issues that John Lewis had brought up at the March on Washington are very real in the 1940s. And some of those issues will be spotlighted at times. That March on Washington in 1963 almost occurred 20 years earlier in 1943 by A. Philip Randolph, the guy who introduced John Lewis. And so this war in many ways is showcasing Jim Crow at home and taking that on, and then also taking on totalitarianism. When you came into the Google Meet and on my slide, I had the double V campaign, and that's what's going on in this war, is a double V campaign organized by the NAACP, some labor groups as well, and other activists, and really take on those two issues. So I got a little video clip here. Let's watch it. It's about African-American training in this war and what it might mean to them. And then we'll go from there.
In the largest training camp of its kind in the world, 800 colored rookies get their basic physical build-up for eventful days to come. 10 weeks ago, they were coal miners, steel workers, mechanics, professional boxers. In fact, most everything from college teachers to Pullman porters. A few weeks more of this intensive drill, and they'll become the field artillery replacements of the famed 16th Battalion, a compact fighting force of cannoneers, radio and signalmen, an all-Negro group assembled from all over the nation, a well-trained unit ready and eager to join the fight for survival of the great democracy that gave them birth.
All right, men. On behalf of the United States Army, the reception center here at this camp, we're glad to welcome you here today and into the United States Army. We're glad to see all of your happy, smiling faces. You'll be converted from civilian into a full-fledged soldier.
When I went in, they have pad and eyes, Negro, hair, Negro, color, Negro, complexion, Negro, race, Negro. Everything was Negro except height and weight.
Despite the bravery of African Americans in all of America's previous wars, despite the argument made by the NAACP and others that a Jim Crow army cannot fight for a free world, the armed forces of the United States remained strictly segregated. Black draftees from the North, sent to training camps in the Deep South, encountered Jim Crow laws for the first time. Some who defied those laws paid with their lives. Some men refused to serve in a segregated military and were imprisoned for it. At home and overseas, there were frequent and sometimes bloody confrontations between black servicemen and white civilians, black troops and white ones, over women and local customs and equal access to military facilities. Growing protest by African Americans would force the military to make a few changes. An Army Air Corps training camp was set up at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. A single ship, the USS Mason, was manned entirely by blacks, except for her commander. The 761st Tank Battalion would eventually fight in Europe, sent to the front by George Patton with the admonition, I don't care what color you are, so long as you go up there and kill those Kraut sons of bitches. The Marine Corps had refused to accept any blacks at all. But after 1942, as casualties in the Pacific mounted and pressure from civil rights groups intensified, John Gray and others were finally allowed to sign on and serve in segregated units.
They did not intend to have blacks as fighting units. They intended to have them, if at all, as support units. Look like you ought to appreciate the fact that you're not up front. But they didn't want you to get that kind of a glory.
All right. Do we have any thoughts, reactions to that? I know it's just a little snippet. I always like to give you little snippets here and there. So again, 1.5 million are put into the uniform, but not many of them are actually going to get what we'll consider combat duties, a combat duty. That some are put into support. So again, that speaks to how the military viewed them and how they planned on using them. They did mention the Air Corps, the Tuskegee Airmen. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence about their success in this war in terms of supporting our long-range bombers and having a remarkable success. And so if you are focusing on African Americans, you definitely want to bring in the Tuskegee Airmen. Now, one thing, as I said, 1.5 million are put into the uniform. Now, there's also a number of African American males who did not want to participate in this conflict as well. And again, it's because of Jim Crow, in that some of them will become conscientious objectors and may find themselves in prison because of that, or find themselves in different roles and responsibilities. Some of them are just like, if this is how the government is going to treat them, then not going to put on the uniform to represent the government. So you have the range of thoughts here. All right, so looking at that assignment, what are we learning? What are we learning here about the impact here? See if I can get at least three thoughts here about what we're learning about the human impact here. Either put it in the chat or unmute and give me your thoughts. I'm looking for 3. What are we learning? What are we knowing? All right, well, we're working on what we are learning about the human impact of war. If I was doing this, I would hopefully, if I was doing this, I'd be pretty much done with my research by today. I look at this as really day 3 of working on this, and so research should pretty much be done here. And if you haven't started, that's really putting a lot of pressure. Monday, this is due. All right, this is due Monday, and so now it's putting it together. And maybe even today, it's that you're putting that piece together and finishing it definitely on Monday, because this is a summative piece here. All right, looks like there we go. Conscientious objectors were either medics or stayed home and worked at national parks. Absolutely. Again, I think of the medic from Hacksaw Ridge that gets an award as a result of what he has done in that one. So there, we got one of them. Give me another one. Ooh, we're struggling on being Minnesotans here today. Minnesotans, remember, we do things in 3s. All right. So I'm not going to belabor here anymore. My final thoughts here to you is, if you're missing some work, you have till Wednesday of next week to get it taken care of. If you are going to struggle to meet that deadline, reach out to me, stay on this Google Meet. We can chit chat about it. Or just send me a note, something like that. And the important thing is get an action together and do it. Those who, as well as have been maintaining the pace, continue to do that and finish this trimester strong. We do know that trimesters 3.1, 3.2 are probably going to be a little different than what we have had these past weeks with distant learning and the switch over to hybrid learning. We'll be adding some new layers to it beginning of trimester 3, and we'll learn more and more about that in the days to come with it. So again, recap, let's get this done for Monday. Missing work, let's get that done for Wednesday. Finish this trimester strong, and also on the weekend, make sure you take some time for yourself and have a fantastic weekend. And in order for that to happen, let's have a great day.